What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college basketball week 4 top 25. As always, I have Ty joining me here. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Get to 200 subscribers where we will be doing that item giveaway. All you have to do to enter is just be subscribed to our channel. But we got to talk about who's dropped from the rankings. Obviously, we have Iowa and Texas Tech. And then we got our Wolverines. And Ty, I'll let you talk about our Wolverines here and the others receiving votes.
Yeah, just making me a little worried just because we don't have the talent that we had last year. So I was not expecting us to get off to such a slow start like they did last year. But it's a big week for Michigan. They get Virginia at home tomorrow and then Kentucky in London on Sunday. So I think if you go 1-1 there, that at least will give you some hope of a turnaround here in the next month or so. But other than them, I would look out for Iowa. I think Iowa looks really good to start the year. And I think they're going to be a really dangerous team again in the Big Ten.
And then starting the top 25, we got Ohio State jumping in 2-1 in Maui. They played pretty solid. They lost to San Diego State, but bounced back with two straight wins. And you can thank Justice Swang. He's been pretty solid as well, along with Bryce Sensabaugh. Those two players have been carrying this team early in the season. But if they go into Cameron Indoor and get that win, I think that speaks volumes for this team for the whole year because, obviously Coach K is gone, but to win in Cameron Indoor is a tough task in itself. So if these Buckeyes can get that done, then hey, you might be looking at least a top 15 team next week.
At 24, we have the Aztecs who took down Ohio State, but then lost their next two games in Maui, coming in fourth. But I think they're going to have a really good season in the Mountain West like they seemingly always do. I think they'll win at least 25 games this year. And, obviously the Mountain West is not anything like the competition they just saw in Maui. So I think they should win probably 15 or 16 of their conference games. And I think they'll be a force in March. Matt Bradley's a guy to watch out for. Really good defender and really good scorer. And this team's going to win a lot of low scoring games, which a lot of teams don't like to play in.
23, we got Iowa State. They beat Villanova and UNC in the same exact week. I'm sure not too many teams have done that before, but the story is this ended on a sour note. They lost to UConn by 18 after having a very good start to the week in the Phil Knight Championship, but you got to like where this team's direction is going. They get two easier games. I guess you could say easier. St. John's is a very good program this year, but not the same competition they just faced. So I like Iowa State here to stay, in the rankings for another week with two wins this upcoming week.
At 22, we have Maryland. I think this is a team that no one really saw coming this year, going through a coaching change. And of course, they had a rough season last year, but Kevin Willard is just proving to be the guy for the job, and he has done a great job so far. They have some really dominant wins, and I think you'll find out a lot about them I think it's Friday when they host Illinois in a Big Ten matchup. Obviously, Louisville, they should win that because the Cardinals are having a really down year. So I think it'll come down to that Illinois game where they can really prove themselves and show that they're back here in year one.
21, we got UCLA. They're starting conference play this week, and they're moving down after two wins last week, I know, but you're going to see why as we get deeper into this video. But, they're going into conference. I think this is one of the favorites to win the Pac-12. You got to get started early. If you win these two games, it sets the tone in the conference. And, you got to go rely on Jaquez. As long as he's there and healthy, this UCLA team has some magic in them to make another run, at least to the Sweet 16.
And we have Kentucky dropping again, now all the way down to number 20. I think they just have to figure themselves out with their new freshmen and transfers, and I think they will. This week they just went 1-0, but they still have those two losses. One of them was a blowout at the hands of Gonzaga. So I think that Michigan game on Sunday will be very telling, really, for both teams who are both struggling right now. But I mean, they still have a top five player in the country in Oscar Tshiebwe. And once the freshmen figure themselves out, I think they'll be right back into the top 10. But there might be some growing pains here early as you're starting to see.
19, we got Michigan State. And in the AP poll, these teams were switched, actually, which doesn't make sense to me because Michigan State beat Kentucky. They got two tough games that I think aren't going to get as noticed this week because there are some bigger games. At Notre Dame, Notre Dame early in the season is always a tough place to play at. And Northwestern coming off a 1 point loss last week to a very good ranked team. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank on them, but they kept a game close. And that's the first game of conference play. So you know that both teams really need that win to start the season off good in Big Ten play. But Joey Hauser has looked exceptional this year, completely different player from last year. Same with Tyson Walker as well. These two have been really playing well. And if the Spartan team can keep playing how they're playing, I think you're looking at north of a 25, possible 30 win team here in the Big Ten. And I think they are not an underdog, but a dark horse to win Big Ten if they can keep up their gameplay.
And dropping 16 spots here is North Carolina, a team who was 5-0, but struggled to all of those wins. They were all very close. And then they take a loss to Iowa State, who then turned around and got blown out. And then obviously they lost that 4 overtime game to Alabama, who was a little bit undermanned. So I think it's back to the drawing board here for North Carolina. It maybe that run in March was a little bit of a fluke, because you got to remember this team was an 8 seed going into the tournament. It's not like they were dominant all season. So I know they brought a lot of talent back, but I think there are still some early growing pains. And obviously, when you're number one, everyone's gunning for you. So maybe being back down here will help them. But it's right back into the thick of things. 2 road games this week against 2 really good basketball teams. So we'll see what they're made of here.
17, we got Duke dropping a ton as well. They got blown out by Purdue by 19. And that's all I needed to see early in the season right now. Duke is still figuring things out. Obviously, Coach K's departure doesn't help as well. But John Shire, he's going to be a great coach. Just give him some time. And, I was talking about the Ohio State game. If they can come in there and win that, it's going to be a big game for them. Well, same goes for Duke. I think, with 2 losses already in the season, they get 3. They might be falling out of our rankings here next week, just depending on if some other things happen. But these Blue Devils, don't worry too much about them. Come ACC time, they're still one of the heavy favorites to get it done, because that conference, in my opinion, is not as good as it has been in recent years. So expect these Blue Devils to bounce back nicely over these next few weeks.
And falling to 16, we have Gonzaga. So this just shows how wacky this start has been. We've already seen Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, and Gonzaga here, and we're not even to number 15. So it's just been weird, and it's no exception for Gonzaga, another team who got blown out by Purdue, who you'll see later on. But I think they just don't have the shooting that we're used to them having. They're never a great defensive team, but usually they have a great big man and they can shoot the lights out. Well, this year, aside from that Xavier game last night, they only have the big guy in Drew Timme. So that's something that they need to figure out. This week they have a really big game against Baylor. But obviously they're going to fall into West Coast Conference play and win pretty much all of their games in the conference. But they have some things they need to figure out if they're going to turn the corner in March.
15, we got Illinois staying put here. They went 1-0 last week, took care of business against Lindenwood, blew them out by 33. But they start Big Ten play this weekend at Maryland, which is going to be a tough game to play. Both of these teams looking to prove it early in the Big Ten. And I think there's no more team deserving to prove it than Illinois, with a lot of departures last year, transfers leaving, transfers in, freshmen. I still am unsure of this team. When we start getting into January, I think that's going to be when I start to really think that these teams are going to be legit or not. Because, obviously they're playing Lindenwood, who I've never even heard of, which is a D1 program, but blew them out by 33. So you can't really get a good assessment there. But Syracuse, obviously, we're going to see how they do then. That's a good storied program. And then on the road at Maryland, as I said, it should be a great game.
At number 14, we have Tennessee, a team who took a really bad loss to Colorado, but since then they have really bounced back, dominating Kansas to win the battle for Atlantis, which is always a really tough tournament. No exception this year. A lot of really good teams out there, but now they get to 5-1, 2 more easy games this week, so they should be 7-1. And if you take away that Colorado game, I think this would definitely be a top 5 team, just given all the chaos that's happened so far. So I think nothing to worry about right now for Tennessee, and I think they'll be right back at the top of their conference.
13, we got Auburn staying put. They won the Cancun Challenge, And that was the team that I was talking about with Northwestern. They beat Northwestern by 1 point. And I think it's more telling about how good Northwestern might become this year, because it seems like every year in the Big Ten, there is a team that makes a surge. Penn State's done it before, Northwestern's done it years before. Maryland is sometimes, and they're doing it right now. So there is one team that no one really sees coming in the Big Ten, and maybe it's that Northwestern team, which could pan out to be a really good win for Auburn come March. But right now, they have a very easy schedule with SEC play starting next week. They get all the easy teams first before January, and I think that's good for them because they lost a lot of production last year. Obviously, Jabari Smith Jr. was a huge factor last year for them, and now they're still adjusting. But 7-0 is a great start. Probably should get to 8-0 over toothpaste and should move to 8-0 coming into next week's rankings.
And number 12, we have Alabama coming off a crazy 4 overtime win over North Carolina. I actually tuned into the end of that game about an hour and a half before it ended. It's like, oh, there's 4 minutes left. Ended up watching all 4 overtimes, and they look like a really good team. They can shoot really well. Remember last year, this team shot a million threes every game, but never made any. This year, they're actually making them, which makes them a dangerous team. Javon Quinterly looks like a really good guard to give them some depth. So I think this team's going to be really good in the SEC, and obviously that conference is just wide open this year. So look for Alabama to have a really strong season.
11, we got another SEC team with Arkansas, who's playing Troy currently. Looks like they're about to pull away. They're up 11 with 49 seconds to go. So nothing too scary there, but they were down a half, which is kind of concerning. But I think it's a little bit of a hangover with coming from Maui and then immediately having a game 2 days later at home. So I think they're just still adjusting, getting back into reality. But hey, if you can do that and get a win, that's obviously a good sign that this team is legit. So you got Ricky Council and Anthony Black putting up solid numbers so far this year. And this Razorback team, as you said, could be one of those front runners to win the SEC this year with it so wide open.
And now we get to the top 10. We have Creighton here. Overall, really good week in Maui, I would say. 2 really good wins, and then a really close loss to Arizona, who, according to the AP poll, is a top 5 team. So no shame in that, really. Ryan Nemhard, remember, he got hurt at the end of last season. Now he's back and he's playing really well. And this team has a lot of shooters and they play really good defense. So I think they're going to be a really dangerous team. You got to peg them as co-favorites in the Big East, I would think, along with UConn. But I think they're in for a really good season. But we're going to learn a lot more about them this week as they go to number 2, Texas.
At 9, we got Indiana jumping into the top 10 as well. This is in part to them being undefeated right now because all those other teams that you've seen before are already jumping behind. They're still moving up. And I like what's going on here with this program. Xavier Johnson, I mentioned earlier video, he's going to be the key player to this team this year, not Trace Jackson Davis, because obviously he's going to have his great games, but the production elsewhere, that's what is the most concerning to me. I'm very anticipated to see this UNC Indiana matchup, see how that's going to pan out for mostly Indiana rather than UNC, because I think UNC is going to get the victory just because I think there's still too many question marks here surrounding the Hoosiers.
At number 8, we have Baylor, a team who has a really tough week here coming up. They go to Marquette, a team who plays really good defense, likes to swarm you, and then they get Gonzaga on a neutral court. So that's 2 really tough games. I think this team is going to be really good this year, but I don't think they'll really hit their peak for a while because they have a lot of new pieces, a lot of guys who were kind of role players last year that are stepping into bigger roles this year. So I don't think the team you're seeing right now is what you'll see in March. So right now they just got to pick up their good wins while they can. And I think once they get into Big 12 play, you'll start to see the real Baylor, which I think is going to be a really good team.
7, we got Kansas, who just won tonight over Texas Southern. So they got Seton Hall remaining this week. But you can scratch that stat of the last 4 wins being by an average of 5 points because obviously they blew them out tonight. So that's the outlier, I guess. But it's kind of concerning to see that this team, is ranked so highly and so touted, is kind of struggling early on. I know they're still getting the wins, but hey, a few shots don't go their way. And this team, might be 3-4, 4-3, and might be out of the rankings. So it's kind of concerning because They are still figuring things out. They got Grady Dick, one of the best freshmen in the country. He's been playing exceptional, and if he he keeps that up, this Kansas team might be on a crash course for another run at a national championship and going back to back. But it's going to come down to Jalen Wilson as well. Obviously, he is the key factor for this team. We've seen him dominate so far in a lot of games. Did again tonight, and we'll see if he can take that into Big 12 play starting next week for them.
At number 6, we have UConn, and I think this is where all 6 of these teams from here on out have a real argument to be number 1, just because that's how crazy it's been this season. UConn wins the Phil Knight Invitational, which was one of the best Thanksgiving week tournaments. They didn't have to take as hard of a road to get there as we thought, with some teams losing. But either way, 3 really good wins for this team, and they dominated Iowa State in the championship, who was coming off a win over number 1 North Carolina. So I think they're going to be a real force this year. Remember, they were a really good team at the end of last year and returned a lot of talent, including Adama Sanogo, one of the best big men in the country. So I think this team is going to give a lot of teams fits this year. And I would say they're probably the favorite here in the Big East.
At 5, we got Arizona jumping from 10 to 5, and that's because they won the Maui title with that big win over Creighton, and they dominated San Diego State and Cincinnati. So this team looks like they are just going to keep on rolling from last year's success. They got Azulis Tubelis, I think that's how you say his name. He's been pretty good this year, and Omar, or is it Umar? I think one of those two, Balo. I'll call him Balo because I can't pronounce his first name. This is gonna be my whatever, the guy from Kansas, Abak, whatever whatever. I couldn't pronounce his name last year, so I'm gonna not pronounce this guy's name this year. But he's averaging a double this year, so obviously you gotta like that. And then when your team has 6 guys averaging almost 10 points a game or better, you're doing something right here. So Arizona is most deserving of a top 5 spot.
At number 4, we have those Purdue Boilermakers, who were unranked to start the year, picked maybe 9th or 10th in the Big Ten, and they're just dominating really good teams. They steamrolled Gonzaga and Duke in back-to-back games, and they're getting what we thought they would get from Zach Edey, but it's the role players that are making them into a top 5 team. It's a 7'4" center surrounded by shooters and really good defenders, and that's what makes this team very good. And I mean, they don't really have an absolute superstar. They have a lot of really good players and a lot of really good shooters. And this year, there's no dominant team. So I think the teams that gel really well will be the teams that prevail. And Purdue looks like they're one of those teams.
At 3, we got Virginia, who, I think is kind of exceeding everyone's expectations already. I said in our first video, watch out for this team. I think they're going to be a dark horse to win the ACC and possibly make a run. Well, they haven't even played a game in the ACC yet, and they are already number 3 in the country, in our opinion. So obviously, this team is better than I thought both of us thought they would be at this point in the season. But they do have a tough test this week, obviously on the road at Michigan, who, we've had ranked preseason and then just fell out this week, but it's probably 26 in our rankings right now. And then the first conference game is always the toughest at home, so it's a little easier. But Florida State, they always play teams tough in conference play, so it's not a pushover game. But when you have Armaan Franklin, this team is just going to be really good. I love the Cavaliers right now. Tony Bennett's doing some good things with this program. I know it's only 5 wins. It might be a little bit of an overreaction just because they haven't lost like almost every other team yet. This could be a year that we see the Cavaliers kind of stay around this spot, not get enough credit like they normally do every year, and then somehow, some way in March, oh, they made another Final Four.
At number 2, we have Texas. Didn't really do much this week, but absolutely dominated Gonzaga 8 days ago. So I think they have a very strong argument to be number 1. And this week they could, I think, solidify that if they can beat Creighton. I think if they win that game, you'll see them jump Houston in the AP poll next year. And then they have Illinois here coming up soon. So 2 big tests for Texas, but it's Chris Beard, so you can always expect this team to be ready. And I think he's already making his mark here at the beginning of year 2.
And at 1, we do have those Houston Cougars getting #1 placed in the AP poll for the first time in 30 years. But it is concerning how they got there. They won only by 5 at home to Kent State. Yes, Kent State from the MAC. But I think they're going to rebound nicely this week. #1 team in the country for the first time in 30 years. Obviously something to be proud of. And you got to thank Marcus Sasser. Last year we loved this guy before he got hurt. He was the driving force of this Houston team, and it still didn't matter even when he went down and the role player stepped up to lead them to a, what was it, Elite Eight run, I believe. And I can honestly see it happening yet again because the American Conference isn't nothing spectacular. Houston has good players they can recruit. Kelvin Sampson plays great defense. So expect this Houston team to be 30 plus wins when we're getting down to it in March. And you got to like what you're seeing so far from these Cougars. But that's going to be it for our video today. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below to be entered into our giveaway. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.